Portions of this show are recorded. Strap in and be prepared.
You just heard Baby J about 3 minutes give his entire A to Z on what was going on. I didn't interrupt you.
I don't even like I got to everything, honestly.
No, you didn't get to everything.
Interesting guests.
Kelly Graves, Mike Parker, Josh Pate, Melissa Lombardi, Yogi Roth, who said that Justin and I are smart.
Sharp opinions.
I think Dan Lanning sitting in his office going, you know what, fine, give us the toughest road to win the national championship. That's what it should be.
I think that this team is going to go as far as Malik Murphy takes them. There's a lot to like about this offense if he's who we think he could be.
And some smiles.
Is this thing on?
Is this thing working? No, that's why you got to do this. You got to go.
Hello?
Hello? Testing, testing,
it's like the little
testing.
girl in Nemo where she's tapping on the glass.
Fishy! Fishy, wake up, Fishy!
It's Danny Havel.
We have to be more specific. We have a lot of pickle things going on, apparently.
Justin Grossweiner.
I've been wrong before, but that's what I think.
Danny and Justin starts now on Fox Sports Eugene and Newport. Sitting in for Danny today, it's Goose, Steve Mims.
Welcome into the Danny and Justin show, and you got it right. Danny's Hawaiian vacation continues, and it is week 2 of a Danny-free week, at least 80% Danny-free. If all travel flights go according to plan, Danny will be back on Friday. But until then, Justin, it's me and you for a few days as we wrap up the Civil War we spent so much time talking about, which turned out almost exactly as we thought it would. And now the chance to finally preview the Penn State game this week.
It's a good week, at the very least, so you can't complain about being here.
No,
we got plenty to talk about.
Believe me, I was here some summer weeks when you and me were dying to find things to get us through. So I am more than happy to be here for this one as we, like I say, wrap up the Civil War and then get a little bit into the Penn State game. I was going to start off, Justin, telling you, and I'm ashamed to admit this, and I feel bad about this. It's really sad how much, when I wake up on a Monday, how happy I am if my fantasy football team won and how it kind of rules my day. And so I won yesterday in my main league. I had the most points of anybody in the league. It was a really bizarre. Nobody wants to hear of anybody else's team, I know, but I'm just saying I won.
That's the first rule of fantasy football.
I've had like a skip in my step all day long. I couldn't be in a better mood today, and I think it's all because my fantasy football team won. I guess it's kind of, you need something to get you up and out of bed every day, and on those days it is. And I can tell you it's the opposite. If my team loses, then I'm in a bad mood. So it's a good day today when your fantasy team wins. But it shouldn't control my life, my Mondays like it does. But it does.
Well, that's fair. And I'm at a point where I'm probably going to lose. I'm in 3 leagues. I'm in a dynasty league, and I'm in 2 redraft leagues. And one of the redraft leagues, I need Montgomery to not score 7.5 points. So, not looking great. But I completely agree. It kind of rules my day. I'm in 3 leagues, so I'm kind of always checking stuff. I'm a big Trey Benson stockholder, so
stock up.
That was a big. I'm never happy about injuries, but it's like you kind of have to prepare just in case. So I have him in all 3 of my leagues. So I'm all systems go with Trey Benson.
Cam Scadaboo, thumbs up, stock up, as Tracy's going to be out for a while. So
I'm also big on Quentin Johnston. I have a lot of Quentin Johnston right now, so that's looking pretty good for me, I think. Yeah. So mid-tier results, but I'm all about building. I'm all about building toward the end of the season. So. I love fantasy football. It's great.
I do too. And I was that again. Nobody cares about my team, but nobody else has a radio show, and I do today.
Exactly.
So I can talk a bit about it. So 4 of my top 7 picks: Xavier Worthy, Jaden Daniels, George Kittle, and Aaron Jones, all out this week. 4 of 7 out in week 3. I replaced Jaden Daniels this week with Caleb Williams. Nice move. I replaced George Kittle with Hunter Henry, who had 2 touchdowns. So anyway, I feel pretty good about my general manager skills in fantasy football today.
That's what it's all about. Absolutely. You got to make those moves.
Absolutely. All right, so I'm in a good mood about that, but you're in a bad mood about the AP Top 25. It came out today, or came out yesterday, technically. Oregon is number 6, and you had a beef with the fact that Miami is now number 2. And first off, the man you have to blame for that is somebody we all know, John Wilner. Wilner Hotline for the second week in a row. He has Miami number 1. That has helped Miami get to number 2, and you are not happy to see Cristobal Island floating ahead of your Oregon Ducks.
Well, it's not even the fact that it's Mario Cristobal. It's just the fact that there's so much inconsistency with these AP polls. And I just think there's a total lack of common sense. And I've talked endlessly about why I don't think LSU should be ranked as high as they are because they beat Clemson, who, by the way, is now 1-3, which I'm not upset about. But to me, why is Miami moving up after beating a team that their only win this season is Long Island? I was wrong before the show. I said Long Beach State. It's
I didn't
Long
think Long
Island.
Beach State had a football team, but I wasn't going to correct it.
It's
so you're talking
Long
about Florida
Island.
here.
I'm talking about
Florida's
Florida.
team's
And
on,
so
yes.
Miami basically beats Florida 26-7. And that's enough to vault them ahead of several teams. I think they were at 6 before maybe something like that, 6 or 7. And then they go up a few spots. Like, I don't know. Oregon goes up after beating Oklahoma State by 60 points or whatever that was, but then they move down when they win by 20. But all of a sudden, if it's an SEC team or that's being beaten in Florida, then Miami, we have to move them up. So I don't know. And we've talked about how we don't really know almost anything about these teams.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, the only really big games that have been played are Ohio State, Texas, Notre Dame, and Miami. We thought in the beginning of the year that Clemson and LSU was, but Clemson just isn't a contender. I mean, they're just not a team that I think you can look at as a good win at this point. Maybe they end up the year and they have 8 wins, and they're a team that makes it to a decent bowl game, and then I think I'll think about it differently. But as of right now, why, because of our perceived notions ahead of the season, do we have these teams ranked as high as they are? And, of course, they're going to be totally different rankings when the college football playoff rankings come out. Those are ultimately the more important rankings. But these are the rankings we have to talk about right now, Steve. So I'm going to talk about these rankings. I don't really like the way that they're inconsistent, and there's no common sense.
Well, there isn't, and that's the beauty of the AP Top 25. I would almost even argue that we could be doing this a month from now, and you and I still might be saying, I really don't know if this team's any good or not because of the way scheduling goes. Now, Oregon's got Penn State and Indiana coming up. We're going to know a little bit more about them. But the way these schedules work and teams don't play each other, we saw it last year with Indiana. Indiana was able to get to 11-1 without having to face another good team.
Yeah, we didn't know how good they were the entire season. Basically,
Cal was on that way until Cal got smoked by San Diego State 35-0. They were on pace to potentially have a 12-0 sched because they weren't going to have to play Florida State and Miami in that conference.
Or Clemson.
I think Houston's undefeated right now.
Although maybe you want to play Clemson this year.
That's true. Houston's undefeated right now. I think Georgia Tech's undefeated. So there's a lot of teams that can sit here and puff their chest out. Yeah. Villanova, I think, is undefeated. But unfortunately, with the whole, it used to be, again, not to be old man, get off my lawn, but we knew these teams were going to play the top teams in their conference, and now they don't. And even Oregon is playing Penn State and Indiana next, but they're not going to play Ohio State or Michigan in the regular season. Illinois, another ranked team, they're not going to play. So I think it's hard for these top 25s. I'm also, though, not in favor of hey, why do they do the polls early in the season? Let's not do the polls until October or something. Just relax and have a little bit of fun with college football. It's okay to rank some teams. These are not determining our playoff. No. And these are telling us that number 3 is playing number 6 this week if it's Oregon Penn State. If we don't have rankings, we're sitting here going, boy, I think these are 2 of the top 10 teams in the country. Well, I think so, too. It's okay to have these to kind of – it's not just to build interest, but, again, we've got people who are voting, and they're not going to be perfect, but at least – we're not seeing where Houston's ranked number 1. It's not like somebody's just doing something really dumb. Mm-hmm. So I'm okay with the polls being out there early. I'm not going to get quite as upset at you as Miami. I think that the Miami thing, if you're making the argument for Miami, you're saying they've beaten Notre Dame, which is as good a win as anybody's had, we think. But again, Notre Dame's 0-2.
They're 1-2, yeah.
1-2.
Yeah.
They beat Florida.
Their big win's Purdue.
They beat Florida, who we thought was supposed to be good, but then they lost to USF. But then it was like, after USF beat Florida, then Miami beat them. So there's this feeling like they've got 3 good wins, Notre Dame, Florida, and USF. But we, like you say, we don't know.
I don't think any of those teams are that good.
Notre Dame and Florida both have losing records, and USF doesn't. So it's part of the issue with college football is just that we have so many teams, and they don't all have to play each other, and it becomes subjective. I think as we get down the road, we'll have better ideas. But again, we're going to have a team like Indiana last year who comes through and has to play. And like I say, it could have been Cal. I know somebody said Maryland has a really, they just smoked Wisconsin.
Yeah.
They've got a really easy conference. I think they play Ohio State, but other than that,
sure.
I mean, that's a team that could be last year's Indiana. That could be 11-1, and we're sitting here going, I have no idea if this team's any good or not. So I understand the frustration people have with polls, and a couple weeks ago there was that voter who, kept Florida ahead of USF. Right. Even so, there are things like that throw it off. I think if you get 52 sports writers together, it's at least going to have you in the neighborhood. And again, then instead of us sitting here and saying, it's just easy to say number 3 versus number 6 this week rather than sitting here and trying to explain, well, in my opinion, Justin, these people. Mm-hmm. So I'm okay with polls. They're not determining. This is no longer the old days where the national champion is determined by 62 AP writers. It's now determined by the committee, which you could say the committee might take some look at the polls as they do as well. But I'm with you that Miami seems to Again, did we go through those top ones? Ohio State, you put them there because they're undefeated and they've got the win over Texas, which we thought
best
was
win
good.
in the country, maybe.
But now how good's Texas? Texas barely beat UTSA a couple weeks ago, and that. Again, Miami we've talked about. Penn State's number 3, and they haven't beaten anybody yet. I mean, Nevada was their best win. So if we're going off eyeball test in early season, Penn State can't be 3. You mentioned LSU. Well, LSU's got 2 good wins, Clemson and Florida. We know you don't think either of those teams are any good.
No.
But again, when they beat them, they were good. So we have to, I guess, give them some credit for beating them when they were good. Georgia hasn't beaten anybody yet. Oregon hasn't beaten anybody yet. Maybe Oklahoma's the most impressive. They've got a win over Michigan, and they beat Auburn this week. I mean, if you're going off of early season wins, I'd have Oklahoma in my top 5 just based on how they've looked. Same thing, Florida State. They beat Alabama. They haven't beaten anybody else, but they had that one there. And Texas is down at 10 because they have a loss. So I'm with you that it's a little, but I just hate the people who get all uppity about we can't have polls. Relax and watch some college football and maybe have a beer and try to have some fun with it.
No, absolutely. And Danny is one of those people that doesn't think we should have polls for 4 weeks or whatever. And I disagree. I mean, I think that the polls are fun. They're things to talk about. And like you were saying, the college football playoff polls, much more important. These are just talking points for us to talk about these teams before the season. And it's really just kind of interesting looking at the perceptions of teams and which teams are the highest one-loss teams and which are the highest two-loss teams. Notre Dame is up in the top 25, and they're sitting at 1 and 2. And we have all these preconceived notions heading into the season every single year because a team was good last year. And so we sit there and say, well, but they were good last year. Notre Dame went to the national championship game last year.
That's
How could they not be
was
good?
ranked number 9 this week.
Well, and they were another team that, like Clemson, which I think goes to disprove the point of if you have a lot of returning production, like Penn State, and that's kind of the reason Penn State's ranked so high, that doesn't always mean that you're going to be one of the best teams or you're going to build on last season, because talent ultimately is talent, and there can be a ceiling for talent. You could see a team one year, and then it's not like they're just going to be better the next year necessarily if they don't add to it. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's just early enough in the season where our preconceived notions are just starting to be like disillusioned a little bit, where we're seeing some of the teams that we thought might be really good. Texas, for instance, they just haven't looked that good. Arch Manning hasn't been the guy that we were expecting. And so we start the curtains being pulled back a little bit on what the real contenders are going to be. So I'm super excited for Oregon and Penn State just because of that. And I'm excited that Indiana, the Illinois boy in me was kind of rooting for Illinois. But in terms of Oregon, it's actually much better for them to have Indiana ranked at number 11 right now, and they're going to play them after a bye. So they're going to have, I think Indiana might have a bye as well, but there's just an opportunity there finally for them to get at least on the even schedule in terms of preparation, because they're going to have to deal with that all season long, because Penn State just got a bye heading into this game. It's going to be an advantage for them. So, but it's a perception game. I mean, if Oregon goes out there and if they lose 31-7, then all season long there are going to be people questioning how good is Oregon, even if they beat Indiana. So it's a big. I'm not saying they're going to do that, but it's just a big game for them, because if you're to look at their schedule at the end of the year, Oregon doesn't have the toughest schedule in the world, obviously.
I'm interested in one thing you just said. You just said Penn State coming off a bye, they have an advantage. Is that a bye?
Is that an advantage? I think so. You have more time to prep. I mean, they haven't played anybody.
The whole playoff thing, all I heard last year was that Oregon had too much time off.
But that was like a month. That wasn't 2 weeks. I mean, I think that's a fair point. But Oregon gets an opportunity to get another game in there to find their flaws and work on them. I get what you're saying.
I would argue that if they had played Indiana this week and then Penn State, that I'd say the bye matters, because you're going to be full into Indiana, and then you're going to get beat up a little bit because you're playing a good team. But the way it turned out, playing an Oregon State team where you could rest guys, you could get more live reps. Your young guys who we haven't seen a lot of got more live reps against somebody else, got out without any injury, won big. And then, like I say, I wouldn't even be surprised if maybe they were scouting a little bit of Penn State last week. So I think it depends on the schedule. But I think the way this worked out, and especially Penn State, which hasn't played anybody yet, I would almost think it would have been better for them to have, again, maybe even just a Wisconsin, somebody they could have beat up on, but it could have given them some some live rep type things. So I'm not convinced that the bye of Penn State was a huge advantage.
My guess.
Now, coming off a bye and staying home, I would like to see the schedules makers say, hey, if you get the bye, you're going to go on the road. I don't like the fact that the team that's played is going on the road to face the team with the bye. That would be my bigger concern.
I'm guessing. This is just a total guess. From what I recall, I believe after the big long layoff going into the playoff last year, Dan Lanning talked about how the extra prep time was an advantage for them. So I would guess that he would probably say it would be an advantage for them.
Yeah.
I'm guessing. Well, I don't know for sure, but just from the coach's perspective, they're not thinking about, well, we're not going to be ready to play from that bye. They're thinking like, well, we get more time to scheme, and we're going to figure out what's the best chess pieces and where we're going to put them and stuff like that. So it's just a guess. I do think you have a great point, though. Like, it might not necessarily make sense as a advantage this early into the season where there's not that wear and tear. Yeah. You haven't played the teams that are really going to test you. So I totally get it. I mean, it just totally remains to be seen, really, even how good these two teams are.
Yeah. What they think, I don't know, because they can't tell me exactly what they think. They just speak coach speak. I can pretty much promise you, if you ask James Franklin was an advantage, he'd say, no, it was probably more of an advantage for Oregon. And if you ask Dan Lanning, he'll say it was an advantage because they had a bye. It's always, no coach ever says, coach is ever going to say, yes, we have a huge advantage coming into this game, But I would be curious to have, maybe if we can get a coach on, maybe we can get Woody on or something this week to ask that, because I do. Again, I know it depends a little bit based on, again, if you're Oregon and you were in a physical beat up, beat down type thing, but when you're in kind of a pillow fight, quite frankly, with Oregon State, to where you could just kind of go at your own pace, get some live reps against another team that's not you. I'm not sure if Oregon wins next week, if we might not be here a week from today saying, man, I think it was good for Oregon to play that Oregon State game rather than having a bye because they got to get a little bit more. Now, again, if somebody had broken a leg or something, we'd, again, be saying, but the way it turned out, I think, if nothing else, it's maybe no advantage. But I think that if you asked Oregon the way it worked out, they'd be happy they played last week.
Well, just looking into the future, I guarantee you that what we're going to be talking about next, the week after Penn State, is how, either way, I think even if Oregon wins or loses, how the Indiana game is going to be a letdown game.
Well, but that's also the example of when you want the bye, because the Penn State's going to be a physical and an emotional and a win or lose. If you win, it's the highest of highs for a regular season. If you lose, the national media is going to be beating you down. I think, and then to have, again, if Wisconsin was coming in that next week, I wouldn't say much, but having that week off, I think works when you've got another good team coming. And you're right. If Oregon loses to Penn State, I don't think there's any chance of us looking at and I don't know that I even really believe that there's, overlooking games. I mean, you got two ranked teams on your schedule. Is it that hard to get up for two?
Sure.
I mean, I would think it shouldn't be that bad.
I'm not saying that's what I think's going to happen. Yeah. I'm just saying that's what people are going to be talking about. That'll be the talking point
from people like Zach Neel and those people who are out there spreading rumors and all those kinds of things.
Yes.
Speaking of which, we're going to have Zach Neel on with us next. Zach with Ducks Wire on the USA Today Network and the host of the Believe in Oregon podcast is going to be coming on. We will recap a little bit of the Oregon State Civil War and then get into Oregon-Penn State and whether or not in 2 weeks the media will be telling us that Oregon is overlooking Indiana. Maybe we'll even ask Zach what he thinks about the AP Top 25 poll. All right, you're listening to the Danny and Justin Show. This is Steve Mims filling in for Danny. You are on KORE, Fox Sports Eugene, and Newport. Welcome back into the Danny and Justin Show. This is Steve Mims filling in again to kick off the week for Island residing Danny this week. And excited to have a regular guest on the show back and chat with Zach Neel. Zach from Ducks Wire and the Believe in Oregon podcast. Zach, how are you doing today? It's finally time to talk about the Penn State game that we weren't supposed to talk about for the last few months.
Yeah, I'm good, man. Finally, we've got it's like the embargo has been lifted. We can finally look at the game that really matters, has mattered. I told Justin before, like, the preseason's over. We can finally, it feels like we're really playing football now.
So Justin and I were just talking. So it's number 3 Penn State versus number 6 Oregon. I told him I'm okay with preseason polls. They build hype. I don't know if one's actually better than the other, but I'm okay with it. He's upset at the polls. He thinks Miami's too overranked. No, but we don't know anything about any of these teams, and that teams are getting credit for beating teams that then lose more games. Are you okay with preseason polls that, hey, let's have some fun, or would you like to see these, wait until later months before we actually start doing that?
I like the preseason polls to give us a basis for, what we should expect going into the year. But so long as once football is actually being played, then you actually adjust based on what you see. I mean, Alabama should not have been ranked ahead of Florida State after week 1, like that anyone could watch what happened on the field and see that, and yet they still were. So, as far as some of the rankings, I know there's been a lot of conversation this year about that, but On the conversation with Miami, I don't think anything ever has happened badly to a Mario Cristobal highly ranked team at the end of the year. So I'm curious to see what happens there. But for the most part, as long as, rankings are fluid, then I think we're good.
Yep, I agree with you. All right. Zach's on Team Mims for this one. That's good.
That's fair. I just want some common sense.
You're never going to get common sense. And get 52 people to try to determine anything. It's not going to happen. So, hey, Zach, like I say, we can finally talk about this now, but Penn State and Oregon. God, if it was Portland State, that would be another miserable one. Penn State and Oregon, did these two, this is the game we've been looking at for 9 months since we knew the date. Did these two get to this point, kind of where you thought they'd be this point in the year?
I think so. We knew that Oregon was going to play nobody before this game. They've done exactly what they needed to do against who they've played. Penn State was the same way. I looked at the measurable between the two opponents, and Penn State's preseason schedule, I should say, quote unquote preseason, was actually worse than Oregon's. The teams they've played are their average ranked in the ESPN SC Plus is 135th in the nation, whereas Oregon's opponents were ranked on average 100th in the nation. So it's, we don't know enough about either of these two teams yet. It's hard to kind of dive into these matchups, and we think we know how good they are. Penn State's got a great rushing offense. Oregon's good across the board on offense, but their defense is solid against the pass, but they could show up a little bit more against the run. So there's things that we've seen that we kind of think we know, but I think we're going to learn so much about both of these teams on Saturday. That's what's most intriguing to me.
Yeah, I saw where James Franklin came out today and said, no, teams don't go vanilla in the preseason because they don't want to show things off. You feel like with Oregon the same? They played a lot of people. You mentioned the run defense had its high moments and down. Do you feel like maybe the rotations get tighter? Do you feel like they've shown us everything, or do you feel like there might be some things that, hey, we don't want to put this out there until we get into that Penn State, Indiana back-to-back to really kind of have some stuff that we haven't put out there yet?
I think they've done a good job of showing what they're capable of without showing everything. Will Stein, I've talked to Jonathan Stewart about this. It feels like they've kind of put so much on tape this year that it kind of inundates other defenses and says, hey, this is what we can do. Have fun preparing for all of this. Have fun trying to stop 11, 12, 13, 14 personnel. The things that they've done out of those different formations and schemes has been very vanilla. They're doing a lot of inside run, inside zone, like screen passes, not anything super complex. That's what I'm excited to see. Like, what can they do that really, it feels like they've been setting up the chessboard to kind of make their move now over the next few games. So that's what really intrigues me, but I don't think that we've seen too much so far other than just how they can line up and some of the personnel packages they can use.
And one of the things that Steve and I were debating about was the fact that Penn State has a bye going into this game. And so I kind of said that it was an advantage. Steve wasn't so sure just because it's so early in the season. Maybe Oregon gets a little bit more time to get guys in live reps. So what's your kind of take on that? Like, who do you agree with here? Is it an advantage for Penn State to get a little bit more time here this early in the season? Or would you rather have had a game this week before the big Oregon game?
Yeah, I can see it either way. It's obviously an extra week to prepare is not bad for Penn State. If you're asking Oregon fans, 3 extra weeks, maybe a little bit too much, as we saw last year. But I don't mind having another game just to kind of feel things out and figure things out. Obviously, you want to be as healthy as possible, but it's not like Oregon was out there having to play their starters deep into the fourth quarter. They got to rest some guys. Noah Whittington rest again. So I think they feel relatively good about where they are going into this matchup. They feel probably pretty healthy. We'll talk to Dan Lenny tonight at his weekly press conference and kind of make sure. I doubt he says anything to us about that, especially in Penn State week. But, it depends on which way you want to look at it. I certainly see both sides.
I do think that next week, that bye, now that we've seen Indiana and what they're looking like,
yes,
that bye helps, because my thing on, Indiana getting a bye, or Penn State getting a bye last week, coming off of a win over Nevada or whoever, they weren't beat up. But, this week Oregon's going to get beat up by Penn State. I think that's the one where it's good to have the bye. So schedule-wise, I think that works out. But just as for covering this Ducks team and being on the beat, we kind of knew the Indiana game could be there. But now suddenly that rises up as well. That may be top 10 as well. This is a pretty fun 3 weeks to be covering a team when you know that you're going to have the next 2 games are going to be kind of nationally, are going to, the outcome will be in doubt kicking it off, but also the result is going to be big news nationally.
Yeah, that Indiana game got a lot more interesting over the weekend. It's funny. I mean, we've spent all year looking ahead to Penn State, and now that Penn State is here, we're kind of looking ahead to Indiana. It's like, no, wait, let's focus on this game for a little bit. Indiana will still be there. We got to bye, but yeah, I mean, this is why the preseason's over. We're getting into the meat of the schedule. You've got some really big games coming up. I think Oregon feels good about where they are. Like I said, they've set that chessboard up nicely. They know that they have to be playing some of their best football right now. You don't want to peak this early in the season, but you definitely want to have the rust knocked off. So, I'm just excited to see what this team looks like when the stakes are high, when it matters. I want to see Dante Moore try and navigate an offense in front of 100,000 screaming fans with a silent count. Like, we have not seen that from him yet. I can't wait to see. We love what we've seen from him so far. I want to see him pass that test as well.
And it's kind of interesting because we did get to see a lot of the major players for this Penn State team in the Big Ten championship game last season. Katron Allen, Nicholas Singleton, the two running backs that are a big problem for the Ducks this week. You mentioned the run defense a little bit earlier. You think that's going to be the biggest thing you're looking at coming into this game? Is there something else that just early on you're going to be thinking about?
No, I think the run defense for sure. I mean, there's a lot of things I'm looking at, but that's, I think, the number one key to the game. If Oregon wants to go and make this competitive and come out with a win, they have to make Drew Allar beat them. They cannot allow Penn State to run for almost 300 yards again like they did in the Big Ten championship game. So, and that's what Penn State loves to do. I mean, they brought a lot of their guys back from last year. They're a really good team in the trenches. They've got 2 NFL running backs. So, and then what we saw from Oregon so far on the run defense side this year has not been perfect. I mean, it's been solid. It looks great week 1, week 2. Of course, that's Montana State and Oklahoma State. Northwestern and Oregon State, they left some questions. I mean, they did well against Oregon State. I should say, they shored up after that first quarter. But it's, I kind of like that they still have a lot to clean up on and feel like they need to be better at going into this game. It's not like they, won by 60 points and were perfect. So, but yeah, going into this game, that's certainly the number one thing I'm looking at.
Yeah, and we look at the running backs, and Oregon's used 7 of them. They've all been pretty good. Could that be one place where maybe Oregon's holding things back? We haven't seen Mackay from Tulane, who was kind of the highly touted one and hasn't been out there as much. It's been Whittingham, and then he's been hurt. And then Jaden Lamar. Do you think we've seen what that depth chart is, or could there be a chance that maybe somebody we haven't seen as much, Jordan Davidson, somebody comes out and suddenly is the bell cow in a game against Penn State?
I think we start to see fewer players than we have. I think this is the part of the schedule where you start to see that depth chart kind of restricted a little bit. Assuming that Whittington is fully healthy, I think he will definitely be the number one. Jaden Lamar has looked very good in his absence, and even before he was gone. He's just a very solid running back, too. I know I'm not alone in thinking that De'Aaron Hill is probably the most talented back on this roster. I think that his ability to be patient in the backfield and then hit the hole and just kind of get into second gear is second to none on this team. So, and then, like you said, Jordan Davison is maybe one of the best goal line backs we've seen since Cyrus Abibi-Likio, so that's always been fun to watch. You mentioned guys like some of the other guys, Mackay Hughes, for sure. One of the biggest surprises of this season, because I think I'm not alone in thinking that he would be a lot more productive than he has been so far. That's not to say he can't be still in the future, but so far we haven't seen it. But what we have seen is still good enough to be a very solid team. We'll see if it's good enough to, go into Beaver Stadium and win on Saturday night.
You're listening to Zach Neel. He is your beat reporter for USA Today's Ducks Wire. And if he sounds comfortable on radio, it's because he hosts both your Believe in Oregon podcast and is part of the Ducks Rising podcast. That Ducks Rising podcast has kind of been the first year for you doing that. You guys have had some great stuff on there. Jeff Schwartz comes on. Give us a little update on that Ducks Rising and what folks can get out of both that and the Believe in Oregon podcast this week with Jonathan Stewart.
Yeah, that's been a lot of fun. Actually, we recorded the Believe in Oregon podcast earlier today. We had former Georgia Bulldog David Pollock.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Used to be on ESPN College Game Day. He was on with us today, so that was a lot of fun. The Ducks Rising podcast has been a ton of fun. We've got, like you mentioned, Jeff Schwartz comes on with us every week and breaks down film. 8-year NFL vet, very, very smart football guy. I've learned so much just talking to him and watching film with him and breaking it down. So that's a lot of fun. It's the busy season. You guys know it. It's a lot of content left and right.
Absolutely. As we kind of last thing on the Penn State games we look at it, it's interesting to me that You've got James Franklin has this reputation, can't win the big one. Can go 10-2 every year, but loses to Ohio State and Michigan type thing. This is obviously a huge moment for him. I think he's 1-10 against top 10 teams. This is a big moment for him. Drew Aller's been sort of this, 5-star potential top number 1 pick, and it's been good, but hasn't had that kind of over-the-top moment. At Oregon, I think Dan Lanning shed that can't win the big one last year, although the Ohio State one may have let some people kick that back on. And you mentioned with Dante Moore, we've seen it, but how have we seen it with 100,000 people in the whiteout type situation? I feel like there's an opportunity this week, coach and quarterback, but other spots, that really some legacies could be built. The winning coach is going to have his fan base, is going to be wrapped around their finger, and I think the winning quarterback, whoever wins this with a decent performance, could really propel them into being, competent to lead their team into a national title race down to the end.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I honestly feel good about Oregon's chances. Well, not chances. I feel good about Oregon going into this game because I honestly don't feel like there's too much pressure on them. Not many people outside of Eugene are expecting them to go into Penn State and win on the road with a first-year starter quarterback and all that they have new on this roster. Like, if they do that and Dan Lanning pulls this off with 4 returning starters from last year's team, that's an incredible achievement. I don't think a lot of people expect them to do that. On the other hand, if Drew Aller can't get it done and James Franklin loses another, top 10 matchup at home in a whiteout, there's going to be some serious questions. And not that they're going to be calling for his job. He's a great coach, great recruiter, but, that will just be another notch on the belt of maybe can't get the big game won. So if I'm the Ducks, I feel like you're going in there kind of playing with house money a little bit, because if you lose this game, what changes? Nothing. You're still in the Big Ten championship race. You're still in the hunt for a college football playoff spot. If you win it, awesome. You've got a lot more hype around you and a lot more people looking your way, which I know that they're good at playing in that spotlight. But if they lose this game, it's not the end of the world. But if Penn State loses this game, there's going to be some serious questions.
And there's a lot of guys that you could highlight about the Ducks, but the one that I want to is Decorian Moore, who's obviously been one of the 2 Moores we're looking at on this team. But he's a freshman, and just the things that he's doing, we had high expectations. He was obviously the top receiver recruit in his class, but has there been anything that, since we've actually started to see him on the field, has surprised you, even knowing how talented and how highly regarded he is?
It's not necessarily what Moore has done. Yes, it's what he's done, but more so the connection between him and Dante Moore. That's not something you always see with a true freshman and a first-year starter. At quarterback, for them to gel so quickly, it shows, how much work they put in together this offseason, training together down in Texas. We saw them connect on multiple back shoulder throws last week, which that's an incredibly hard thing to do. Like, that used to be a thing when Aaron Rodgers would do it. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, look at that. That's incredible. Now you got Dante Moore and a true freshman wide receiver doing that. I've just been really impressed with how quickly he has clicked in this offense with Dante Moore. And just coming into this year with such high expectations, to have met them so far through the year is just a really great achievement in its own.
He is Zach Neel, folks, the perfect guy to kick off Penn State week, as he is as on top of it as anybody. As I say, go follow him on Twitter at ZACHARYCNEEL. And Ducks Wire, Believe in Oregon. Listen to that one. Comes out, the Ducks Rising podcast. Zach, like you say, I know it's content season. You're getting pulled a lot of ways this week, not to mention the fact that you have 2 children. But I appreciate you taking the time with all that's going on to come on and chat this with us. And tell your wife I said hello, and we will hopefully look forward to catching up with you soon.
Absolutely. Both kids are napping right now, so nowhere I'd rather be than talking with you guys.
All right, grab yourself a microphone then. You got more content to put out until those kids wake up.
Yes, I absolutely do.
Awesome, Zach. Enjoy Penn State week and the bye week and Indiana to follow, and we'll keep reading you and following everything for the latest on Oregon football. Zach Neel.
Thanks, guys. Let's talk soon.
All right, he is Zach Neel, and that was our first chat about Oregon Penn State. We've got some guests lined up for the rest of the week that'll help us get more into it as well. When we come back, we are going to wrap up the Civil War. It was kind of everything we thought it was, and we'll get into what went right for Oregon and just how bad Oregon State looked when we come back for our final segment. You're listening to the Danny and Justin Show on KORE, Fox Sports Eugene and Newport. All right, welcome back in as we wrap up a Monday show on Fox Sports Eugene and Newport. KCNU in Newport, KORE here in Eugene. And, you know, I tempted to say Oregon, we break down the Civil War. It's kind of what we thought, and we'd said all week it's probably going to be pretty ugly. Turns out the gambling line knew exactly what they wanted. It was 34.5, and the final score is 41-7. So if you were kind of the second week in a row, if you were on the Oregon side, you got the blowout you wanted, but it was just a point or two too short for the gambling part of that. But my bigger takeaway was Oregon State. I mean, Oregon kind of did what we thought, but I know there's a liner with proof of you saying that Oregon State goes as far as Malik Murphy, and I think he proved that again on Saturday, as they're not going very far because he hasn't been great. I'd be interested to know. I mean, he didn't look super interested out there, quite honestly, to me, once they kind of fell behind. And it was all going to be running. I mean, they were clearly doing the Northwestern strategy. Just try to run, get 100%. Some first downs. And hey, to their credit, it was 14-7 with 2 minutes left in the first half, and you're thinking, hey, maybe. And then all of a sudden, Oregon scores, comes back out, and it's over. I would almost look more into and when Trent Bray was first hired, I questioned the hiring of Ryan Gunderson just because I thought if you're Trent Bray and you're a first-time head coach, you're a defensive-minded guy, and you're a young guy, I would have gone on the first hire and maybe would have been a veteran offensive coordinator. I wanted somebody that I could just say, you take the offense, I want to deal with the defense and the roles of being a head coach. But he went and got Ryan Gunderson, who had basically been an analyst for Chip Kelly, and the main reason he was hired was because he was an Oregon State grad, and knew him through that. It's kind of like we talked about last week. Trent Bray, was there any other team in the country that was going to hire him to be head coach if Oregon State doesn't? No. And nobody else was going to hire him. He may have gotten a job as, but he hadn't been an offensive coordinator type.
He was elevated.
Yeah. And then there was, so they bring in Malik Murphy, and it was like this idea, and it just doesn't seem like it's working between those two. And again, I don't know if Malik won 9 games last year, Duke. I got to think he's better than he looks. But I also think his receivers aren't very good, especially with the kid from Westview who got injured, Clemens, before the season. I don't think their receivers are really good, and that hurts Murphy. And again, once you get to 0-4, it becomes tough. But I'm not sure that Gunderson's been great as a coordinator. I would think if Bray gets another year, which at this point I think is becoming more and more of a question, you probably want to go out and find a veteran. I would think almost that the athletic director would say, you can come back, but hey, Ryan's really good, and he may be good at some point. But right now, for you to be just defense in that, you got to have a guy who can run this thing a little bit better. But I was stunned at how it was like you just felt like, other than running for a first down, when Malik Murphy dropped back, you didn't watch that thinking there was any chance that Oregon State could make 2 or 3 big plays in a row in the passing game. It was almost a miracle if they caught one.
Yeah, and Trent Walker didn't make a catch. So right? They basically covered him the entire game and made other guys beat them, and the other guys just really didn't beat Oregon.
No.
There was only 4 players that made a catch for Oregon State receiving. The running game, it started off decently in the first quarter. It was a weird game. It was one of those games where you look up after the first quarter and you're like, this game's tied. We did not expect this going into this game at all, and it was weird. By the end of the game, I sort of had this feeling of like, well, Oregon State actually didn't play as bad as I thought going into the game. And then you kind of look at the stats and you're like, it's kind of pretty rough.
Yeah.
It was pretty rough out there in terms of just the amount of yards that they gave up and then the amount of yards they got really after the first quarter.
Yeah.
They got 74 or 75 yards in the first quarter, and it was decent. It was like, on paper, you were competing with Oregon. And maybe that's what they can take going forward, is that they had some success in that first quarter, kind of righted the ship at least a little bit. But then afterwards, like you mentioned, you kind of look at Malik Murphy's completion percentage, and you're just like 5 of 18.
6 of 18 or something.
5 of 18.
5 of 18.
For 68 yards. And it's just like, he didn't throw any interceptions. I don't even know if there were any that were particularly close to being intercepted. But it almost felt like they were just non-competitive throws, where he kind of knew that they were covered, and he'd throw it either in, the dirt, or he'd throw it too high, where it never really felt like Oregon State, kind of went for it, know? It just sort of felt like, they just sort of knew that Oregon was going to be able to stop the run after, the first quarter, and then the passing game, they didn't really do anything super risky. No. It just sort of was a lot of, punching it back and forth, and their special teams at least looked a little bit better.
Yeah.
If you want to count some things, the punter was able to get the ball, which was which was a good start. So, it was just a weird game, and honestly, just the intensity didn't feel like it was there really on either side, especially early on for the Ducks on their side. Definitely think they kind of coasted their way into this game in a way. But it just was a weird game. And in a lot of ways, honestly, I'm kind of glad it's over.
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad. I think this is the analogy I used on on game day. It's like two kids that you just need to send to their rooms, and then we can go in the living room in a couple of years and we can talk about things. But just for right now, I think it's good that these two teams and programs separate for a year and kind of just like reevaluate. And then it's a long time though. 2 years from now. I mean, that's a long time. So we'll see what happens in between then. But just in terms of this game, it just felt like a weird game to me.
Yeah, it's one of those when you're just basically begging to get 10 yards and keep the clock running and keep it. I mean, you know that the other team knows they don't have any confidence that they. Same thing with Northwestern. These team 100%. Has no confidence, and we're going to dare them at this point too. Because if they throw it, odds are there's something bad's going to happen for them. We're going to pick it off, or it's I would be curious on Malik. Again, here's a guy who was a 5-star at Texas, playing in a really competitive program. Transfers, goes to Duke, wins 9 games. Again, pretty competitive. And then you come all the way out to little old Corvallis, Oregon. You're taking the money. You took the $1.5 million, which was credit to him. You're going to take the money in there. You almost wonder, and then you're 0-3 and moving to 0-4, and it looks terrible. You almost wonder if for a guy like that, it's like, man, this is just hard to get up. So I'm not from around here. I don't know many people. I kind of just took the money and ran. We're on a bad team. I've been used to being on really competitive teams. We'll see, though. I mean, they've got Houston coming this week. Houston's 4-0. They lose a game at Houston. I think the Boo Birds are out at Reeser on Friday night if they, fall behind or look really sloppy again. And this could be kind of a slow trudge to the end. And if you're Malik Murphy, this might be the one where maybe you could get this is where you make your stand and come out and have a big one, leading to a victory and turn it around. But if it looks like it did last week, then I might just be convinced that he's just having a hard time getting super motivated out here.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great point. And he is one of those guys where the expectation with the amount of money he's getting paid, and I think that there's been some self-destruction that hasn't necessarily just been him around him for this program, but he's the kind of guy that, especially with what you're paying him, that he should be the one that's coming in there. He's, clearly the leader and motivating this team and putting out, you want to see him be the guy that you could sit there and go, well, look at everything that's going around him, but he's still performing. Yeah. And it just hasn't been that. There's just something missing there with these relationships. It seems like, doesn't seem like everybody's kind of on the same page. But, I mean, he's super talented, really super talented. Yeah. Whenever anybody talks about him, all these other coaches, whenever they do their press conferences before, he's got such a huge arm and blah, blah, blah. But I think that's starting to turn into one of those, it's like in prospects for the draft, when all you start to hear, in basketball, I mean, in the NBA, when all you start to hear about him is, well, he's really young and athletic, blah, blah, blah. And then they start to get older, and that's all they have still. Yeah. Where it's like Malik Murphy, it's we keep on hearing about how he's got this great arm, but we've seen plenty of guys with great arms. Yeah. What else can he do that brings to the table in terms of just winning games? The potential is there. We kind of knew that, but we need to start seeing things on the field that are leading to production and success.
Yeah. Yeah. For folks who are listening in, Oregon State fans, or want more information on Oregon State, on Wednesday, we're going to have a cool guest. Kerry Eggers is going to join us. Kerry's a longtime Portland sports writer, works extensively covering the Blazers and the Beavers. He's got a new book out, and he wrote a little bit on an interesting thing on his website last week about Trent Bray. So Kerry's an old friend of mine, and he's going to come on and join us Wednesday. So if Beaver fans out there, I know who Kerry is, and we'll be interested in him. Flipping the page from that Civil War to Oregon, I don't know that there's a ton you take out of it. The one thing I would say is, like I say, after Northwestern and Oregon State, where you basically had two teams that were just trying to get you into an ugly contest and try to ugly the game up and just, we're totally afraid to get out and throw it. I think if you're Oregon, you look forward to facing a team that comes in thinking they're on equal footing with you, thinks they have a quarterback who can throw it, and finally you can go into a football game where you feel like, hey, this team's going to try to go toe-to-toe with us. And I think that'll excite the Oregon people, this week, that, hey, we got a team that feels like they can stay with us, and we're going to go mano and mano with this. This isn't something where we, we're just trying to stop some team from uglying this thing up, and some team that's trying to keep it close so that they can walk off and say they only lost by 14 to us. I think it's a different mindset from Penn State, obviously, in the week after in Indiana, and I'm excited to see Oregon. I think they're going to be pretty fired up, especially the DBs, to know, hey, all right, here comes a guy who's had some hype as potentially the number one pick in the draft, be that as it may. What do you think about him? But it's been there. All right, and this guy's going to test us a little bit. Let's finally be able to show people what we got.
I think the biggest thing my biggest takeaways from the Oregon side of this game, Dante Moore was great. I think he played really, really well. We continue to see a ton of running backs, and to me, honestly, one of the bigger surprises was the fact they actually did a punt fake, and they went for it on that. And he after the game, the punter James Ferguson Reynolds said that it was something that wasn't planned. He just saw the space and went for it. I don't know if that's true. I would love to know if that's actually true or not.
I think if the game, once it's out of hand like that, that probably is. And they probably do tell him,
they
hey,
have a full re-range?
If you see that big of a area and you can get... Now, if it had been 10-7, if it's 10-7 at Penn State in the fourth quarter this week, does he have that same freedom? Probably not.
Probably
but
not.
I think when you're at home and you know the game's in control, but they probably do tell him, hey, for the most part, if it's 4th and 5 and you see a 6-yard thing there, you can go for it. So I don't think that it was a designed fake. I'll say that. I don't think Lanning said, but I think he has said to him probably, hey, if you go out there and see something creep open like that, go. But again, you probably put the brakes on that in a game where it's every possession is going to be a little bit more valuable.
No, totally. I think that was a big takeaway of mine. Was I was just really surprised they ended up running a punt fake ahead of a game against Penn State. And then there was a couple of weird special teams things. Like they in the first quarter, one of the things that led to an Oregon State stop, I believe, was when Gary Bryant fumbled a punt return back there. So I think there's obviously things that they need to work on. Their run defense wasn't perfect, like Zach said, but I don't know. It's just so hard to say based on the talent levels, and I just think that there's something to be said about what you're saying is if you're facing a team that you kind of know is on the same footing as you, I think that those, little plays over the course of the game, you'd like to think that there's not going to be any lackadaisicalness or anything like that. Not that I think there has been. I think they've been into it, but I agree with you. I think it'll be good for this team to play a team that is really on the same footing as them. There
was no play in that game to where you would have thought if you were an Oregon player that the pressure's on that, man, if we screw this up, the result of this game's in doubt. And that's what changes this week. If you're a DB who gets beat against Oregon State, you're going, okay, well, that's okay. We're going to still come back. You get beat this week, you think that might be the one that determines it. Again, if you've run a fake punt and you don't get it, all of a sudden that, so I think the stakes are so much higher and the plays that, again, that's what I get excited for. But that's kind of, and again, that's what Zach was talking about, wanting to see Dante Moore in front of 100,000 people. Dante Moore hasn't dropped back to throw a pass yet to where there had to be even a thought in his head, if I throw this interception, we might lose the game. That hasn't happened yet. That play hasn't been there. That will be there this week. Even in the first quarter, he's got to be thinking, hey, if I make a mistake here, this could be the kind of thing that comes back to get us. Same thing on the other side. Hey, if he probably hasn't thought I have to make this throw or we don't, get it done. So there's some both sides of that. But the pressure's ramped up a little bit. And we'll see. Again, maybe with this one that one of the teams gets off to a big start and it's more of a blowout than we think. I'd be surprised by that. But I do think both these teams have not been in a situation where a single play could determine a game or have that kind of pressure riding on it. And this will be the first one where it does. So I'm excited to get to it. I'm excited it's a 4:30 kick around here. I think that's good. I like getting up and doing some stuff on it. The last few days we had tickets to the last 2 games, and it was like to get on the shuttle and get over and see some friends for the game. We were leaving the house at 8:30 in the morning on Saturday. So I like having Saturday free, get some things done, and go turn on that TV at 4:30 and see where it's going to go. So it'll be a fun one to keep chatting about for the rest of the week.
It will be. And I think it is a really good timing in terms of where this is in their schedule. If you're thinking about the long term, obviously this game is going to be really important as it is, but thinking about where the Ducks want to be at the end of the season, I think it's good to get a ramp up starting now. They play another big game against Indiana. And then I'm not saying they have a reprieve. I think everybody's going to look at that Rutgers game. It's that's another trap game. But, they play Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, not teams that are nearly on the level of a Penn State. So you're kind of getting that ramp up, and then you're going to really get into the meat of that conference play. And then at the end of the season, USC and Washington, who I think Washington might be ranked as well by the end of that.
Yeah, potentially.
Time we get there. So we'll see.
Yeah, and it was a similar last year. My recollection was that Ohio State last year was on October 4th, so maybe a week later. But this was about that time when Oregon had, the preseason games had not, there were more questions about Oregon. We had wondered about the offensive line because of those, but they won them all and they went into it undefeated. And that Ohio State game was a great moment, and it really catapulted them, I think, to give them the confidence to run through the rest of the season undefeated until they ran back into Ohio State. But I think that was kind of similar timing wise, and I think this will be as well, like you say. And I love the way it sets up with Penn State come home, get a bye, and then Indiana comes through. And in 3 weeks, halfway through the season, once Oregon's played 6 games, as we started today talking about, we don't know what all these teams are. We're going to know what Oregon is. We're going to know, for better or worse, what they are. And, if they're 5-1, they're still in it. If they're 4-2, they're probably still in it, but, maybe out of the conference race. And if they're 6-0, they might be number 1, 2, 3 in the country look like this could be another 12-0 team heading into a conference championship game. So, all right, Justin. Well, I appreciate it. Hope you're not tired of me yet because it looks like I'm back for a couple more days. We'll be back in here tomorrow with a guest to chat about Penn State and Oregon. This is Steve Mims filling in for Danny. You're listening to Danny and Justin on KORE, Fox Sports UG.